If that quote sounds anything like you, don't stress it. We're gonna talk all about that today. I've got you 100% covered. So, enough of that, let's talk about Frizz. Okay, so I figured this would be the perfect place to take you and talk to you about Frizz. Why? Well, two reasons. One, because we know one thing that causes frizz, and that's moisture. And look around, not the driest place on earth. And two, because I like to hike. So, yeah, there's that. But hey, this is how today is gonna go. I'm gonna walk you through the different reasons that frizz happens, and heads up, there's more than one reason frizz comes, and there's more than one way to deal with the individual reasons that frizz shows up. So I'm gonna walk you through why it happens, how to deal with the individual situations, and then at the very end of the video, I'm actually gonna walk you through a very simple process of how do you deal with it. Now you have the information, what do you do from here? Oh, and by the way, I might show you stuff on the way. So yeah, let's go. Okay, so one of the first things that causes frizz is obviously humidity. But the question is why? Now, first of all, I've talked before about bonds. I've talked about disulfide bonds, and the disulfide bonds are affected more by chemical processes. They're a lot of the reason that your hair breaks when it goes under extreme stress from chemicals. But your hair also has something called hydrogen bonds, and those hydrogen bonds actually help control the shape that it's in. So basically what's going on is when you get out of the shower, dry your hair, and those bonds are drying, and as they dry, they lock into place. But then when they get moist again, they break down because they're very easy to break, and it loses that shape. If that shape was smooth and straight, well, now you're gonna see more of that bend. And essentially when you get more of that bend on some of those hairs, you get those little frizzy looking hairs. And that's essentially what's going on. It's unruly hairs that are ending up looking like or translating as frizz. So one massive problem is humidity, right? If you're in a low humidity place and you walk into a high humidity place, obviously that moisture in the air is going to affect your hair. But what you might not have known is actually going from high humidity then into low humidity can also affect this issue and create more frizz. So basically what happens is your hair is trying to create an equilibrium. It's trying to create an equilibrium between the moisture that it has and the moisture outside. If you go into low humidity, water and moisture will actually start seeping out of your hair, trying to create that equilibrium, and that actually can cause frizz as well. So, how do we manage it? First of all, you can finish your hair with a little bit of an oil. That will help to calm those frizzes down, and it will help to add a little bit of moisture if your hair is a little bit lacking in the moisture. Now, the thing that you want to pay attention to is making sure that it doesn't have a lot of silicone in the oil. If there's a lot of silicone, many times that can just coat the hair, and it actually doesn't allow it to equalize that moisture very well, and that alone can cause frizz in the future also. Now, one other thing that you could do is actually use a little bit of a wax. If you want it a little bit stronger, waxes are great, but you also want to pay attention to the oil content. Remember, I did another video where I spoke about waxes and explained the amount of oil based in a wax will determine its control. The more oil you have, the more shine you typically have, but also the less control you have. When I say control, I mean getting your hair to stay where you put it. The more control you have, typically the less oil there is. Now, another way is try drying your hair in the environment that you're actually heading into, and it's gonna help create a little bit of that equilibrium. Now, of course, you're gonna wanna use your styling products, the normal day-to-day routine, but that's gonna help that moisture balance out a little bit more, and it's gonna help you in this situation combat a little bit of that frizz. Now, if you have curly hair and this is creating frizz for you, you wanna make sure that you comb through your hair with a large tube comb, starting at the ends, moving your way up in the shower. Once you get out of the shower, you're gonna apply any product that you use to smooth out that cuticle and add back in the moisture that you need. So you wanna put the product in your hair, you wanna blow dry it. Ideally, you either let it air dry, or if you are gonna blow dry it, you would be using a diffuser, and then you allow it to dry. Now, if you have fine hair, you wanna make sure that you follow the same process that you would typically follow to create volume in your hair. And typically that means using a volumizing aid before you dry your hair, making sure that you're not using a product that's got alcohol, and really everybody should be doing that if you're worried about frizz, because that can draw some of the moisture out of your hair. But you wanna make sure that you're using your styling aids, create the amount of volume that you want. And then if you've got little flyaways kind of going on, many times even a hairspray by itself can just spray those little hairs down and lock those into place, and you should be good. A little bit of a heat barrier would be good prior to drying it. So use something that's going to help minimize the heat damage if you're using heat, and just make sure that you aren't over drying your hair and causing the next concern that we're going to walk into right now. just walking up this trail right back there, and I looked up ahead of me and the trail kind of does this turn. And as I looked up, I said, something just looks like I just caught a glimpse of something, right? And I was like, what was that? Like, was it a deer? And so I looked up and I looked over there. I just saw some trees move up there. I wonder if that's it. It's a cougar. It stopped and it stared at me for a little while, and I stopped and we both just kind of held eye contact, and then it just went off that way. Okay, so look right here. I think this is actually a paw print from it because it's heading right up in the direction that it headed right up there, so that would make a lot of sense. So I'm gonna head down the trail that direction because usually they're by themselves, so I think he's probably this way, but I'm definitely gonna be keeping an eye out. I did not expect to see a cougar up here. So there are a few reasons that you could be suffering from roughed up cuticles or damage. Essentially, it's damaged hair, right? And that is obviously chemical processes, obviously heat processing. You could also be using a shampoo that is overstripping your hairs. Or if your hair is going gray. Gray hair, many times, the same thing that makes it lack pigment also can make it lack moisture. And that moisture lack can also show itself, again, as frizz. So how do you deal with it if this is what's causing your frizz? Well, first of all, again, stay away from products that have alcohol. Many alcohols can dry your hair out, and while you're trying to re-moisturize your hair, these alcohol products are working against you. So pay attention to what your product has in it. If you have oily scalp, but you're still feeling that frizz, and it is because of damage, then you want to be careful about using oil stripping shampoos too often. Another way is being careful about how you're drying your hair. Don't get out of the shower and mess it all up and dry it all rough. Use a microfiber towel or something soft and blot your hair and then allow it to dry. Now, at this point, if you really struggle with frizz in general, then you would try to ideally let it dry naturally. Another way, if you're really struggling with frizz, is just sleep on a silk pillowcase. That alone can cause less stress to the cuticle and therefore minimize the overall roughness that you're seeing, which would obviously minimize the frizz. And then of course, minimize heat exposure. Again, I realize that this isn't something that we all can do, but at the same time, we need to understand that if you're dealing with frizz and it's really a big problem for you, minimizing as much exposure to heat as you can only benefit. If that heat is giving you the smoothness that you're looking for or the style that you want to weigh those two evils. Now, another way is vitamins. It's extremely important that we eat the right vitamins and minerals to nourish our hair. Yes, our hair grows from the inside out. Now, I did an entire video on Shine. It's gonna link right here. Check this out. It talks all about the vitamins that are super important to your hair and tells you why they're important. But I'm telling you now, I know that's not the sexy answer, but that honestly is a huge tip. Another way is understand that if it's a lack of moisture that's causing this, then you want to be making sure that you're trying to give your hair the moisture that it needs. And many times that can be a deep conditioner. Now you do want to be careful with overusing a deep conditioner. Just because it's good doesn't mean that using it more is better. You want to use it once a week, maybe twice a week. If you're going to use something on a day-to-day basis, you can find a leave-in conditioner that could add moisture that would be more effective and not too strong. But using a deep conditioner to replenish the vitamins and minerals that your hair needs, along with the moisture, is going to be a big help and therefore calming down the roughness on the cuticle. If you're going gray and you're noticing more texture in your hair, more frizz after it's gray, then you want to first start by throwing away all the products that you used before your hair was turning gray. If you're 50% gray or more, then and you're starting to see a lot of frizz, we need to change the way we're approaching our hair regimen. It could be that the products you were using before were great for that texture of hair, but now as your hair is lacking moisture, they are now stripping that remaining moisture in your hair that your hair needs, and that could be causing part of the damage. Now, since your hair is lacking that moisture because it's gray, we need to start addressing that. Okay, so there's another way that your hair can get frizzy, and that is from static electricity. What basically happens is your hair gets electrically charged and then it attracts the hair next to it. Pretty straightforward, right? But the real question is, well, what do you do with it? Like, how do you deal with it? Because I know we've all been there at some point. It drives me insane, right? So here's a couple things that you can do to kind of manage that. Now, first of all, dryer sheets, that old maybe myth you thought, actually works. I've actually had that work with people. And bonus, your hair smells pretty good if you get the ones that smell good. But it does actually work, so it is worth a shot just rubbing a dryer sheet on your head and helping remove some of that static electricity. Now, another thing you can do is actually spray a little bit of hairspray on your comb or on your brush and comb through it if it's straight. If your hair is wavy or you have it curly, don't do this. If you don't want to spray your brush, you can also just spray them on and then pat them down very lightly. The key is that you want to spray the hairspray on, very gentle hairspray, not very much, a little bit goes a long way. And if you're going to pat it down, you want to make sure that you pat it very gently so that you don't take all the volume out of it. Now, if you're going to use a product like hairspray or something afterward, you can also use oil. But again, oil is another thing that you also want to be careful of. You don't want to be using oil and making your hair lay too flat just so that you can solve the problem of static electricity. It's one of those which problem is worse scenarios. So pay attention to that. If you don't want to use oil, many times just water. Simply giving your hair a little bit of moisture can do a lot for it and actually get it to lay down. But again, this is a scenario of if you're worried about your hair laying flat, you want to be mindful about how much of this you put in. But a little bit of water can go a long way. So now, what are the steps? How do you deal with it? You've got all this information, you've got Frizz, you know it's a problem. What do you do next? First of all, figure out what is causing it. Is it a textural thing? Is it a dryness damage thing? Or is it a scenario where it's just static electricity and that static charge is making it look frizzy? Once you've figured out what the root problem is, then address it according to that problem, but don't address it according to all of the problems. Now, many of you might be in a situation where you're thinking, well, I've got a couple of these things going on. My hair is wavy and it's gray. In that scenario, address each of them. So if it's a textural thing, then on a day-to-day basis, address the textural frizz. If it's a dryness scenario, make sure that you're also giving your hair that extra moisture that it needs. If your frizz is caused because you've got a lack of moisture in your hair, but you're trying to tame it down the way that you would tame down textural frizz, you might find that that's not working for you, and that's what will lead to frustration. So figure out which of these things is causing the frizz, and then address that symptom so that you can address the overall problem. Like I said before, nutrition is a huge deal, so make sure you watch this video right now, right? Because these guys need food, so you feed these guys when you watch this, so do that. Otherwise, thank you for hanging out. I appreciate you. We will see you in the next video.